Stephania, let's jump into the injury report.
Let's jump.
All right. We're going to start with...
Not the one you just jumped.
No.
Yeah.
Let's start with Javonte Williams.
I did. You just didn't see it.
He had...
Or you mirrored Matthew's
Cat-like
vertical.
Yeah.
Where it's like you don't actually see it.
Yes,
His
very low.
You can
In
see
my
like
mind.
parts of his body going up and down. It's just his feet don't leave the ground.
That's so good.
How many of the jokes do you think about he still hears from our show about him?
I don't think he hears very many of
Oh,
them.
I think he hears a lot.
Does
of
he?
it.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Well, I
think
hope so. I hope so.
All right, if you hear that one, Matthew, just know that you actually can jump really high. I take it back.
Missing you, buddy. All right. Let's talk Javonte Williams. He left the game on Sunday against the Bears with a hip injury, Stephania?
Yeah, that's what it's being called. Adam Schefter reported it as a hip flexor. That's
Okay.
deep muscle on the front of the hip. We don't know which side. It sounds like they're not worried that he's going to miss much time. It's not the severity of the injury per se that has me concerned. It's the stuff we talked about before the season about this is a young man coming off a multi-ligament knee injury that was incredibly challenging, and he made it back in such a quick fashion and actually a really uneventful fashion. I thought the Broncos did a good job of managing his workload through the preseason, and he seemed to respond to it all. But we call this recidivism when you have an injury that follows a major injury like this. We see it all the time. Typically, it comes in the form of some kind of soft tissue injury, and you can't say for sure that these are connected, but it feels like they could be. And the most important thing is you really have to be over this before you come back, because then you're at the risk of a much greater injury when you have this recent history of this big surgery.
Sure.
So the Broncos should be careful with him. That would be my advice that they don't want to hear. But I think you got to be careful.
Is that the word, recidivism?
Yeah.
I was going to say, you got on me for saying expository.
I was just trying to-
expository is
trying to
like
keep up with
fairly
field.
normal compared to
Trying to keep up with the
recidivism.
field on the podcast.
If you had asked me,
heard
was
that.
recidivism
Can you
a
spell that?
word,
No.
or was this an era? I would not know that. Like it was during the recidivism era, we used to do this. Like,
Let's do the spelling.
I'll try. You
spelling
ready?
bee, yeah.
Yeah, do
Tell
it.
me how wrong I am. Recidivism. Can you use it in a sentence?
I just did.
You just did. Okay.
Do you know
Country
the
of origin.
Language of origin?
Yeah. Recidivism. RECIDIVISM. Recidivism.
Your turn.
RECETIVISM.
Oh, God, you're way wrong. Okay. All right.
What do we miss up?
RECID.
Recidivism. Dang it.
IVISM.
Okay. Listen.
This is why you're
All
so
right.
much smarter than
Say
us,
Princeton
Stephania.
over
Yeah,
here bragging
I know.
about spelling as if you weren't the superior speller on this show.
That's all I got.
That's how-
spelling.
that's
so
not
I'm
true.
going to stand in the spotlight with that. All right. Anyway, I think, yes, it doesn't sound that serious. I'm more concerned about just kind of how they manage.
He's been underwhelming this year.
Yes, he
has
has.
been. I think when
tough.
we were, I think the juice just does not seem to be there nearly at the level that it was prior to this injury.
Which you
I'm
would
optimistic.
fully expect.
Yep. I'm optimistic it will get there over time, but I do feel like this is going to be more of a slog season for Javonte Williams than a year when he eventually takes off.
We're going to talk about Jaleel McLaughlin a little later
Yes, we
on in
will.
the show as part of the waiver wire. Stephania, let's talk about Mike Evans, who left Sunday's game against the New Orleans Saints with a hamstring injury.
Yeah, left in the second quarter while running a route, didn't come back. Now, Todd Bowles called it a tweak. This is my favorite coach-like definition. When you look for grades of severity, somebody's calling it a tweak. That sounds like not a big deal, right? It wasn't like a Mike Evans hamstring injury at the past when we saw him go down in the end zone.
So
That
this
was
isn't a
2019.
recidivism thing then.
Right.
Okay. Got it. That's what I was worried about
I
was the
did you-
recidivism.
Yes.
But it's not, so
I
that
thought you
makes me
said
feel better.
revidivism.
I might have said
that a word?
revidivism.
Might
I
be.
don't know. Sorry.
Anyway, it was not, I think it was 2019 when he had a right leg hamstring injury late in the season, and then that was it. He was done for the year. This was, he walks off the field, he's got a little something in his hamstring. You don't want it to turn into anything bigger. Mike Evans is a guy who has played, other than that year where he ended his season early, and that was in December, he has played 15 or 16 games every year he's been in the league.
Wow.
So if you look at that, that's very encouraging when you think about his likelihood of being able to come back and oh, by the way,
And
bye week comes at the perfect time.
Exactly.
Not only that, but I think part of what happened this past Sunday was they were in control of that game. Not that I think he had a great chance of returning, but if
Right.
ever there was a time where you could really err on the side of caution, it's when
Yes.
you're waxing the Saints. I think my favorite coach thing is not when they say tweak, but like the coach will be up there at the microphone. This is not what Todd Bowles said, to be clear, but I will use Mike Evans as an example. Mike has a hamstring.
Oh, he does?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm
Confirmed.
glad he's got at least
Hopefully
one.
he's got 2.
Yeah, well, now we know he has a hamstring. And it's like, anything else? No, just a hamstring.
Yeah.
He's got a hamstring.
Okay,
That's it.
got it. Okay.
Or technically 3 in each leg if
Yeah.
you want to get specific.
Hold on now.
I don't
Yeah.
have.
There are 3 parts to your hamstring.
I have 6
I have
hamstrings.
1 hamstring
Yeah.
on each leg, right?
Semitendinosus, semimembranosus, biceps femoris.
Yeah, spell those for me.
Yeah, right. I'll bet you she could. I actually don't.
You know what's the best part? The best part is that like Stephania could literally be lying through her teeth
I
about
could.
not
I
just
could
the
just
names.
make
Like,
up
she could tell me-
Tyrannosaurus rex,
Didn't
Stegosaurus.
Yeah,
And
literally.
Brontosaurus
Remember when
burger.
someone last year, when Drew Brees' final season, when they were like, "Yeah, Drew Brees has 38 broken ribs," and I was like, "No, he doesn't.
That's not possible.
There's like 6 ribs on each side," and so I was like, "No, there's actually like 112."
12, yeah.
I was like, "Excuse me."
12 minus 100.
Whatever.
That's
I,
so
like,
good.
you could say anything about medicine, and I'd be like, "Yeah, totally."
Yeah.
And then
Sometimes I make things up. I just want to keep you guys, honest.
but the thing is that I go tell my friends about this stuff.
Yes.
So like, just know that if all of a sudden, like, you know how like Twitter now has like fact checking. If I need like a Twitter fact checker to start following me around, when
would be
I'm like,
good.
yeah, guys, I got a big tennis match this weekend. I don't know, my right hamstring is in like the outside third right hamstring
Right.
because
That's
I
right.
have 3. My friend's like, 3
But
hamstrings?
that would actually technically be correct. That's very good.
Way to go, Field.
Wow.
Way to accidentally stumble upon that one, buddy.
To be clear, I don't have a tennis match this weekend. I don't play tennis. Well, I used to, but
Used to. Probably not anymore.
not anymore. Yeah,
not right
If
now.
anyone wants to play,
you're
let me know.
Dad now. You're playing pickleball.
Pickle, yeah, that's what I'm
That's
saying.
right.
It's all about the pickle.
It's all about pickleball.
Pickle or paddle.
Stephania, T. Higgins has ribs.
Yes.
Care to discuss the ribs, Field? Because you're doing a good
I
job.
was going to say.
I was just trying to do my
ribs.
best
So you
coach
got
speak right
112
there.
of them.
Okay.
They're best. I mean, where's the best barbecue? If that's what you want to go, the direction you're looking.
Yeah,
I'm a big Kansas City barbecue fan.
Yeah, there's some jokes there. We will bypass.
We'll
anyway,
move along.
T. Higgins, rib fracture, suffered in the first half of the game. He thinks that he landed wrong, and that's how it was caused. He said it's up to him whether he plays or not, that it's a pain tolerance issue. What are people looking for after a rib fracture? Well, the big thing is, what's the alignment look like? You want to be sure that you're not, that it's not in a location where you are at the risk of damaging a lung. Like that's really the top priority. And so, originally he thought it was back tightness. So he didn't even know right away. And then when he couldn't sleep on it, it was hurting when he coughed. They with the x-rays, he found out he had a rib injury.
I need to ask many follow-up questions here. It hurts T. Higgins to sleep on it, just to lay down, and when he coughs.
Yeah.
But he's going to be able to play football where he gets smashed by huge dudes at the same time. Like, how does this work?
It actually happens a lot. The guys play through these rib injuries. It's incredibly.
Am I not a real man, Stephania? Is that what that is?
You're not the man of like an NFL player's man.
That's what it is. All right.
But
you can say it. I asked.
now sometimes there are times where they can do a pain relieving injection. If it's in a certain location, there are some where you can and some where you can't.
Yeah, right below the 40th and 41st rib
Yeah,
on the
that's where
left
you're
side.
looking
That's
for.
where it is.
I mean, we know we had a quarterback.
Yes, we did.
Tyrod Taylor, who had a punctured lung as a result of an injection. So, it's not like there's caution warranted, but it's also a pretty commonly executed treatment for guys who are having some pain, and it allows them to function a little bit better. But yeah, your rib cage, it moves. I think people think of it as stationary, like armor. No, when you breathe, your rib cage, it expands. So your ribs move with every single thing you do, with breathing, coughing, twisting, turning. You lie on it, you put pressure on it. So it's not even just so much will they take contact on it and will it bother them? It's what happens when they're breathing hard. What happens when they get fatigued? All of that stuff can impact them. So we shall see. I wouldn't be surprised if he missed a week. He'd certainly be within the realm of reasonable possibilities, but it sounds like if he's comfortable enough, he'll play.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday. The problem with saying, okay, if the Bengals' second wide receiver is out, you go ahead and add the third wide receiver because he's stepping up into a second wide receiver role, is that this Bengals offense has been terrible this year.
bad.
Tyler Boyd's a good player, obviously, and I wouldn't be surprised if he is added in a bunch of leagues if we don't see T. Higgins on Sunday. It's just hard to say with confidence that someone not named Jamar Chase needs to be started, even in what feels like a great matchup. Yes, at some point, this Bengals team will turn it around. I just don't know if it's going to happen this weekend. I'm nervous. Yes, this is the person who stacked Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase in my second to last draft of this season, projecting, hoping that maybe I can turn the mojo around by talking about it in a negative fashion on Tuesday before a Sunday game.
I'm definitely concerned.
Think it's going to happen.
I mean, the thing is that Joe Burrow had a setback in season, and that's the biggest concern, is that it's really hard to get back to your original self when you've had that. And we can see part of, if you look at that air yards per attempt stat, I think that's the most telling thing. He is having trouble throwing, and it's his leg that drives when he pushes the ball out.
So I have a question. This is going to be a joke. Please don't get mad.
And he's having to get rid of it quickly. He has to get rid of it quickly because he can't afford to be forced to run a lot.
Should he have just listened to Dr. Jamar Chase when he was like, you know what, you need to just sit out a few more weeks? Is this one of those things where
angry Dr.
Jamar Chase, who was always open, by the way.
Yes, he's like 7-Eleven.
Is this one of those things where, like, if Joe would just have the ability to rest, that he would be able to have more time, or it's not like that? So that's why the team is willing to let him keep playing through it.
Who's a backup quarterback, by the way, Daniel?
Well,
it's not going to happen.
But it's also that if you look at the fact that you had 6 weeks before the season started, almost 7 before he had the setback, what do you say? Well, if you go 6 weeks, then it'll be fine. It probably won't be 100% this season. Yeah. So the question becomes, what is the best that you can get as the season goes along? And you're continuing. So he's doing the stuff to try and work on it and get that strength back in his calf, but he can still be serviceable, and he's probably their best option at quarterback. But for fantasy purposes, it's not going to look the way you want it.
Brutal for us, yeah. All right, let's move ahead. Talk about one more injury here. Pat Freiermuth has a hamstring injury. Is this going to be
He has a hamstring.
He has one hamstring.
He actually has 3 on either side. Yes, but he has a hamstring.
Is this going to be a multi-week absence for Pat Freiermuth?
It is. We're already hearing he's expected to miss 2 to 3 weeks. I'll say this. The Steelers have a very structured protocol in terms of how they manage hamstring injuries that some other clubs have also adopted, but they have a pretty high correlation between what they see on imaging and the player's response to what they project as missed time. So when they're talking about that being a projected timeline, it's pretty reasonable. If you were to go back and look at Steelers players who've had hamstring injuries in the past and sort of what's been put out there, who did they put on injury reserve? Deontay Johnson with a hamstring injury because that one appeared more serious and looked like it was going to take longer for him to recover. This one, they're saying 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe he comes back on the early side of that. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. It's not an exact science, but they're actually, the way they assess and prognosticate and then manage their injuries, they're pretty on target with that. So I think that's pretty reasonable.
Steelers feel tough for me right now in fantasy field. It doesn't feel all warm and fuzzy with all the things going on there, especially with Kenny Pickett also dealing with some ailments.
Yep. And obviously their upcoming bye changes some things with Kenny Pickett's status. It sounds like they'll opt for patience there. It also helps when you have Mitch Trubisky as your backup quarterback, but not that Pat Freiermuth has been lighting the world on fire for fantasy, but he has scored in 2 out of 4 games, so yet another tight end option off the board for some period of time here. I don't know that Darnell Washington, their 3rd-round pick out of Georgia, will step up and play a starting role for Pittsburgh. I'm not sure he'll play a prominent role for them, but he has my attention because he's 6'7", blocks like an offensive tackle, and if you recall the combine, he was unbelievable in some of the receiving drills. So an interesting name to monitor more for dynasty purposes than I think redraft purposes for however long Pat Freiermuth is out.
I like that. All right, Stephania, let's talk another injury really quickly. Obviously, we had Monday Night Football with the Giants. We did not see Saquon Barkley. Instead, we got some more Matt Breida run. How close are we to seeing Saquon?
Well, I think he's close. I mean, he was very open. Like, one thing I really appreciate about Saquon is, like, in this last year and a half, I would say since he came back last year, right, heading into last season when he was really open about how he had struggled initially after the ACL, I think he's been really transparent about how he feels when he's had to deal with these things. And so he said, this high ankle sprain, he feels he's coming back quickly and more quickly than even the doctors he had spoken with had anticipated in terms of what he's able to do. So I imagine that's like his straight line movement and all that. We saw him in individual drills, never really did work with the team, but the things that the high ankle sprain challenges, like you're pivoting and twisting and cutting, still hard for him. And so understandably was not ready to go on Monday, but I think he's potentially very close.
Okay. The Giants could certainly use him. That's my analysis from last night.
Well, if anything, his absence probably just reinforced his value.
It was just a disgusting performance from the offense last night.
All right, we got two other people that are potentially returning, Stephania.
Can we start with Jeff Wilson Jr.? Because that one I think is just a little more cut and dry. So
yeah, Jeff Wilson Jr. now eligible to come back, and I think that from a health standpoint, he's good. Yeah. It's more a question of what's that running back room going to look like.
Yeah, and Mike McDaniel has been asked in the past, can you lose your job due to injury? And he, I think that's something he has previously said he doesn't feel like is a good way to go about your business. And I'm not trying to say that he would be sort of like not a man of his word if he instead played Devon Achane. But how can you bench a guy who's been the hottest running back in fantasy? More on Achane a bit later on in the show. I think that Wilson in a deeper league is a totally fine speculative ad. I wonder if the pathway for Wilson is the possibility of somebody else in that backfield getting banged up. I hate to say it, but the history of Raheem Mostert's health has obviously been something that has been a part of his career. So you hope that nothing bad takes place for he or Devon Achane, but you are one injury away from either of those players, one with an injury history. A rookie who missed his first game of the season because he missed much of the preseason due to a shoulder injury. I think if Jeff Wilson gets 12 or 15 carries a game in this offense with one of those two guys out, he'll have some fantasy value. He'll be like a reasonable flex consideration.
Yeah, knowing Mike McDaniel, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jeff Wilson get on the field.
All three of them
will get play, but I agree with you, and I think it'll be, a little bit initially because there's not really a reason to do anything different.
Yeah, but I think he's too valuable to ignore, especially in deeper leagues, because while we never want to bank on a player getting hurt, the injury history of Raheem Mostert is something that could potentially forecast the chance of him getting banged up again.
So this is why I am trying to sell Raheem Mostert as much as I can right now. And you guys can decide that you don't want to be in on that bandwagon with me, but I'm at a spot where Raheem Mostert has looked fantastic through the first 4 weeks. Obviously, last week wasn't quite as good. But if I have a 31-year-old running back that does have an injury history that is going to get Jeff Wilson back, there's at least a chance that you could see. Don't make a move just to make a move. You'll hear about this in the score report. But I think if you want to see what's out there, maybe see what you could potentially get.
I fear the window might have been last week, not this week, because obviously a down game for Raheem Mostert, Wilson's potential return, and Achane just sort of stealing all the buzz. But I would not hate the idea of trying to parlay
just see what you could get
into a legitimate starting option, because there's a chance that even if Raheem Mostert stays healthy for the rest of the season, the Dolphins do rely on three players because they're trying to be in this thing for the long haul.
How many times when you have three running backs do you have one running back?
Every time?
So what I'm trying to say is, like, within this Dolphins offense, like if you've got three running backs that are going to be a committee,
gotcha.
You don't have the guy that you feel like you can count on.
I think that's probably true. I mean, let's not forget Mike McDaniel came from the 49ers, where Raheem Mostert and Jeff Wilson Jr. were. That was actually, that's all part of how Raheem Mostert got started at the 49ers. And so like that scars you in the sense of, as a coach, knowing that if you don't have running back depth, you're partway through the season. So they have benefited from like three healthy guys is ideal.
Yeah.
And potentially a fourth,
Yes. All right, so then here's the real question. Obviously, Stephania, we're getting Cooper Kupp back potentially this week. He's eligible to be able to be here. Are we going to see him in week 5?
We could.
I
think it's really all about how the medical and rehab staff feel is he ready to handle the volume of work. Now, just because he hasn't been practicing with the team doesn't mean they haven't been doing things to try to acclimate him towards what he would need to be doing in football and really increase his volume of work. That's the big, I don't know what the word is. It's not recidivism.
You usually have so many words.
But you're worried about recidivism.
Yeah. Right.
So you have to make sure he is ready to handle that volume. And it's just so hard to gauge, right? Because we just don't have a tool that says, absolutely positively this person is past this injury.
Sure.
And remember, it wasn't that he had an acute hamstring injury that put him on injured reserve to start the season. It was more that he had just this kind of nagging discomfort, a little bit of nerve pain, and that's related to scar tissue in the area. So it all means you're a little more at risk for something to happen if you're not careful with how you come back.
All right, so here's the deal on Cooper Kupp, at least as far as I'm concerned, for the fantasy takeaway here, is that there are two categories of people that have Cooper Kupp that make up most fantasy managers. One is the people that drafted before the Cooper Kupp setback and they have been sort of finding a way and hopefully keeping things afloat through the first 4 weeks.
Because they used a top 5 pick on him.
Probably use a top 5, yep, maybe at best like top 8 or 9 pick on him. The second is the group of people that drafted Cooper Kupp and got a discount after the injury. That second boat, it's very straightforward. I have no idea what your roster shape looks like right now, but hopefully it's pretty good. And you just got, like, this is like an early Christmas present. And here's the thing. If Cooper Kupp plays this weekend, do I, as a Cooper Kupp manager, think to myself, yeah, I'm expecting 15 catches for 160 yards and a touchdown? No. Would I take it? Of course I would. But everything is gravy if you got Cooper Kupp in the 5th, 4th, 6th, whatever round you got him in, right? He's just that talented. And even with Puka Nakua's emergence, this is still Cooper bleeping Kupp, NFL Offensive Player of the Year, NFL Super Bowl MVP 2 years ago, the second greatest fantasy season, I would say, second or third best ever, right? Like, that's how good it was amongst wide receivers. This guy is one of one in so many ways.
And Matthew Stafford's favorite target.
And while Stephania already alluded to this, and it's much more her wheelhouse than mine, like, this has been the most meticulously planned return. Like, they have been in lockstep from day one between the player and the team. They seem like they've had a vision they have been crafting and working off of. In that 4-week window, Stephania has said before, was almost protecting Cooper Kupp from himself, right? They've built a buffer here. This is gravy if you drafted Cooper Kupp later than the first round in your fantasy draft. Here's what you're hoping for. And I really think this applies to the people that drafted him in the first round too. Those people need him to be great sooner, but truly what you're hoping for is nothing more than this. Whenever he returns, that if Cooper Kupp misses any subsequent games beyond once he returns, it's for a different injury. You don't want that, obviously, but you want this hamstring thing to be a thing of the past for Cooper Kupp, and you want him to, whether it takes a week, 2, 3, 4, emerge as a top 12 wide receiver. I'm not even saying a top 2 wide receiver. You'd love that, of course, right? You would love that. But let's not be greedy in life, right? Like, you've already missed a quarter of the season from him. Like, if you get Cooper Kupp and get a top 10 or 12 wide receiver injected into your lineup for the rest of the season in week 5, other than Puka Nacua and what he's done through the first 4 weeks, that doesn't happen in fantasy. Yeah. It does not happen. So if you have Cooper Kupp, it could be the ultimate. This is like the ultimate shot in the arm for your roster. And this could be the thing that takes a good team and makes it the class of the league, or a team that's been struggling and gets it right back into the mix. Like, if you're 1-3 right now, but you have Cooper Kupp on the way, this is a great thing. We all want him to play in week 5 if he is fully equipped to be back on the field, but just because he has returned to practice. My mindset is not focused in on the fact that he could play this week and might. It's really more focused in on the fact that, like, they didn't have to declare him to return to practice today. Like, they could wait 2, 3, 4 more weeks, right? The fact that he is back on the practice field as soon as he could possibly be back, to me, is the biggest win in this all.
I'm shocked that they're 2-2. By the way, that they were able to stave off.
Also, a huge part of it is that this Rams team is going to be good enough. Yeah. Remember, one of the preseason concerns was, well, if they're 5-10 late in the season,
why are we going to see
Caleb Williams? Yeah. No, it ain't happening. Right? They're going to be too good. Like, there's a lot of football left to be played, but they're 2-2. They could easily be 3-1. By the way, they lost the 2 games they lost. Both of them were close. They played the 49ers tough. They go on Monday Night Football to Cincinnati. Nearly beat the Bengals. This team is legit. I'm not saying they're a playoff team for sure, but they're going to hang around long enough that I am no longer concerned about Cooper Kupp being a healthy scratch for the last quarter of the season.
Nah. Can you imagine? Because now people are going to have to pay attention to Puka as well. So like now, like Cooper Kupp, they were just triple teaming him, trying to bring him down. Like, imagine what their offense is going to be. Sean McVay must be licking his chops.
Oh my God, he must be so fired up.
So excited.
So we'll see on week 5. Obviously, Stephania said the door is open. I know that some of the reporting has been the same. Sean McVay has acknowledged it as a possibility. Adam Schefter did say on Fantasy Football Now on Sunday, his sense was that if not week 5, not later than week 6, right? So, like, I think the longest you're going to have to wait for a season debut is week 6, and it might come as soon as this Sunday. For those that have checked out the week 5 rankings, they're probably up any minute now. You'll see Cooper Kupp probably hovering around like wide receiver 12 or so. Hard to catapult him right to the top of the rankings right away, but also hard to move him much lower than that, because this guy, as we said, we're talking about one of the great players in all of fantasy football.